It had been years since Isla Nublar was wiped off the map, swallowed by molten fury, reclaimed by nature's wrath. What remained of Jurassic World now sat beneath ash and memory, the bones of prehistoric dreams scattered among blackened jungle. For most of the world, the age of dinosaurs was over. The novelty had worn off. The chaos had made its point. Humanity, they believed, had learned its lesson. But they hadn't. Not in the sterile labs beneath Geneva. Not in the weaponized bidding chambers of shadowy syndicates in Macau. And certainly not in the glass towers of the Biosyn Corporation, who had purchased not just remnants of InGen's data, but the ambition to do it all again. Only this time better, cleaner, contained. Or so they told themselves. Far beneath the Swiss Alps, in a complex that didn't officially exist, Project Genesis was reaching its final phase. The operation had been years in the making, quietly gathering DNA samples, restoring decayed genomes, perfecting incubation chambers far more advanced than anything Hammond had ever dreamed of. These were not chaotic test tubes hidden in jungle bunkers. This was evolution refined through human arrogance. At the center of this rebirth stood Dr. Ilara Vaughn. Ilara wasn't like the scientists who came before her. She didn't share Wu's hunger for control or the late Hammond's misguided wonder. She was methodical, brilliant, calculating, but driven by something deeper. Lost. When she was 12, her brother disappeared during the 2015 incident on Isla Nublar. Tourists were evacuated, chaos reigned, and in the panic Eli was never found. She never forgave the world for forgetting him. And when Biosyn offered her access to forbidden knowledge in exchange for silence and loyalty, she didn't hesitate. She would bring back the past, not just for science, for justice, for closure. As snow fell softly above ground, deep below in Lab 9B, something cracked. The chamber hissed open, condensation rising like smoke from a crypt. Inside, a single creature blinked. Not green. Not scaled. Sleek obsidian skin. Slender limbs. Eyes like fire opals. It was not a replica of anything known from history. It was a fusion. Raptor base. Quill-like dermal growths. Engineered vocal capacity. And worst of all, it was born pregnant. She's ready, Ilara whispered to herself. She, the assistant echoed, unsure whether it was wonder or dread in his voice. The creature was labeled Unit I-7, but in the back files, Ilara had named her Nyx, the goddess of night. Because like darkness, this one couldn't be stopped. Meanwhile, 4,300 miles away, Owen Grady was trying to forget the past. Off-grid in the highlands of northern Canada, he now worked as a wrangler, not of raptors but of wild horses. It was a quiet life. Tiring. Peaceful. He liked it that way. But peace doesn't last in a world where ancient predators are being reborn. One night, while repairing a corral, a helicopter appeared over the treeline. No insignia. Just a low hum and a searchlight. Owen's instincts kicked in. He stepped back, reached for the rifle slung by the post, but the light fixed on him and a voice came over the speaker. Owen Grady. We need you. He didn't answer. Just walked inside, locked the door and poured a whiskey. The knock came 10 minutes later. It was Claire. He hadn't seen her in 3 years. She looked older. Not tired, hardened. Like the years had carved her features into someone who had seen too much and still kept going. Her hair was shorter. Her stance more guarded. But her eyes were the same, searching, pleading, burning with urgency. You didn't call, he said. I wouldn't have come unless it was serious, she replied. And it's bad. Let me guess. Someone played God again? She didn't answer. Just handed him a tablet. The footage wasn't long. 30 seconds, low quality, timestamped 5 days ago. A group of armed men in hazmat gear moved through a snowy forest. One of them turned, shouting something off-screen. Then a blur, a screech that didn't sound like anything terrestrial. The camera whipped, fell, and all that remained was the crunching of snow, the hiss of breath, and a glimpse of something impossibly fast. She escaped, Claire said. They don't know how, or why, but she's loose. In the wild. Owen looked up. Where? She hesitated. Then slid a second image forward. A map of Canada. His forest. You're telling me a new raptor hybrid is in my backyard? Claire nodded. And that she can reproduce? She already has. For a long moment, Owen said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly. You people never learn. Far beneath Geneva, Ilara was being interrogated. It wasn't by the military. It wasn't by world governments. It was worse. It was by her own employers. Nyx wasn't supposed to escape. The protocols were supposedly perfect. But now Biosyn was panicking. Not because a predator was loose, but because secrets were unraveling. Because someone had leaked footage of the lab. Because a journalist named Samari Trent was poking around old InGen patents. And because Unit I-7 wasn't the only thing in that lab. There were others. Project Genesis had 5 phases. Nyx was Phase 2. Phase 1 had already matured and gone silent. Elara knew the real danger wasn't in Canada. It was waiting, watching, planning. In a sealed sector of the Alps, a second hybrid sat curled in a hibernation chamber. Smaller than Nyx, sleeker. It resembled a Deinonychus but carried the neural density of a crow. Bioengineered for intelligence, memory retention, mimicry, and it had a name too. Elara had called it Eli. Because no matter how long ago her brother died, she had vowed to bring him back. And this creature, had been cloned from the blood sample taken from Eli's backpack, recovered years after Nublar collapsed. Spliced into raptor DNA. Infused with memory simulation nanotech. Elara didn't just want justice anymore. She wanted family. And she didn't care what had to burn to get it. Owen and Claire weren't alone for long. Dr. Ian Malcolm returned after a mysterious message showed up in his inbox. For words. They're building again. Run. He didn't run. He flew in. So did Dr. Ellie Sattler. And Alan Grant. Reunited, reluctantly, for one last fight none of them wanted, but all of them knew they couldn't ignore. Because this time, it wasn't just about saving people from dinosaurs. It was about saving the world from what people had become. As the snow melted and the forest grew restless, Nyx made her nest. And far below the Alps, Eli opened his eyes. They glowed red in the dark. And he remembered. The forest had never been so quiet. Owen crouched in the snow, the frost of his breath barely forming before the wind devoured it. He raised a hand slowly, stopping Claire behind him. His eyes were fixed on a mound of disturbed snow, barely noticeable to anyone else. But to Owen it was a scream. Tracks, he whispered. Raptor tracks. Not just one set. 4. Maybe 5. Smaller ones. Offshoots. Nyx had already nested. And she had not laid still. The trees bore scars. Deep gashes in bark where talons had gripped too tightly. Blood, animal hopefully, streaked the lower trunks of pine. Something had died here recently. Several somethings. Owen moved slowly, step by step. The wind howled around them, but even that couldn't mask the tension building with every inch. Claire gripped the tranquilizer rifle tighter. She hated being back in this life. Hated that despite all their efforts, this world, the world of cloned monsters and weaponized genetics, never truly died. Why here? She asked quietly as they made their way toward a clearing. Why Canada? He didn't answer right away. Then he glanced back. Because it's cold. Remote. Undisturbed. The kind of place where no one looks unless they're lost. Like us. He cracked a smile, but there was no humor in it. They reached the edge of the clearing and then froze. A massive, skeletal carcass lay sprawled in the snow. Not a deer. Bigger. A moose half-eaten. Flesh torn apart with terrifying precision. The head was missing. Cleanly removed. Not chewed. Twisted. Claire gagged and turned. Owen just muttered, "She's feeding the pack." That night they camped miles away, not daring to get closer. But even from that distance, the forest pulsed with a strange energy, like it was aware of what now walked within it. Every bird call was cut short. Every rustle of wind made the branches shiver a little too hard. Then the scream came. Not human. Not quite animal either. Claire bolted upright from sleep, her fingers scrambling for the flashlight. Owen was already on his feet. They heard it again. Show. Echoing like a metallic banshee. And then, silence. But something moved at the treeline. Shadows danced unnaturally. The snow didn't crunch. It shifted like something glided across its surface. Nyx was watching. But she didn't strike. She was testing them. Back in Geneva, Elara watched the surveillance feeds of the Alps with obsessive focus. Project Genesis wasn't a project anymore. It was unraveling faster than she could control. Biosyn's board demanded answers. Investors were withdrawing. And most damning of all, someone had leaked an internal report detailing Phase 5. And no one was supposed to know about Phase 5. Not even Elara's own team. She stormed into her private lab, sealed the doors behind her, and stared at the suspended chamber at the far wall. Inside, floating in cryogenic stasis, was the embryo. It looked almost human. Too human. Phase 5 wasn't just about dinosaurs. It was about bridging the line between extinct intelligence and modern biology. Creating something that could outthink the most dangerous predator. But Alara had realized something horrifying. Nyx was evolving too fast. Raptor intelligence was already high. But fused with certain crow and cephalopod genes, she wasn't just learning, she was teaching. Her offspring weren't mindless hatchlings. They were listening. And worst of all, they were organizing. Alara sent a code red signal to Biosyn's field team in northern Canada. Do not engage unless full containment is guaranteed. She got no reply. The signal was dead. That same night, Samari Trent, the journalist who'd begun chasing the story of Biosyn's secret lab, arrived in Switzerland. What she didn't expect was to be tailed by a man in a dark coat, who claimed to be a former Biosyn whistleblower. He handed her a file. Inside were redacted schematics, growth timelines, and photos of experiments that turned Samari's stomach. One image was circled in red ink. Unit E1. Tagged Eli. Who's Eli? She asked. The man simply said, he's not what they think he is. And vanished into the crowd. Samari uploaded a single teaser image to her private network, then checked out of her hotel and disappeared. 2 days later, Dr. Ian Malcolm received the image. And nearly dropped his glass of wine. He knew that face. It wasn't Eli's. It was Henry Wu's. And it was stamped across the top of the file. Not deceased as many had believed, but active, hidden, working, beneath a mountain that didn't exist on any map. As Malcolm rallied Ellie and Grant to regroup, Owen and Claire tracked Nyx deeper into the frozen woods. But the forest had changed. There were nests, dozens of them. Some abandoned, others not. They found the remains of a Biosyn team buried in the snow, their rifles frozen in place. And worse, Nyx had learned to avoid the cameras, to strike blind spots, to remove trackers. Owen had trained raptors, knew their minds. But this was something else. Not a hunter, a general. She wasn't just surviving, she was planning. And her pack was growing. Worse, in the final moments of Part 2, something horrifying was uncovered in a collapsed part of the forest. A cave newly cracked open by snowmelt. Inside an abandoned lab. One Owen recognized from photos he'd seen years ago. It wasn't part of Biosyn. It was old. And gen old. But someone had been here recently. And the walls bore strange carvings. Claw marks. Symbols. Almost language. Claire looked at Owen, her breath catching. They're not just nesting, she whispered. They're communicating. From deep within the Alps, in a lab buried beneath miles of ice and stone, Eli stared at a camera feed from Canada. And smiled. It had begun. The world didn't know it yet, but the balance had already shifted. Deep in the snow-choked forest of the Yukon, a storm howled like a warning to the living. Owen stood at the cave entrance, staring at the strange markings, scratches arranged not like random panic but like purpose. Shapes repeated. Symbols aligned with unnerving consistency. Raptor intelligence was already legendary, but this was different. This was design. Claire held up her tablet, snapping photos of the carvings, running them through a crude translation algorithm she'd programmed during the Isla Sorna fallout years ago. The results were mostly gibberish. But a few patterns emerged. Mess. Territory. Warning. And one phrase repeated often. Blood sees blood. Owen looked around the cave. It wasn't just a hideout, it was a blueprint. Small tunnels opened behind them, barely wide enough for the juveniles they'd seen glimpses of. Bones were stacked in patterns. Not scattered, arranged. Claire swallowed hard. She's teaching them language. Owen nodded. Not just teaching. Instilling. Miles away the snow fell heavier. A research outpost, still operating on solar backups and motion sensors, flickered to life. It hadn't seen a living soul in years. But tonight something moved. Security footage, grainy and time-stamped, picked up shadows. 1 raptor. Then 2. Then 7. Moving in formation. Eyes glowing in the darkness. Their leader, sleek, obsidian black, moved like a whisper. She paused outside the station, cocking her head. She stared at the camera. And smiled. Moments later the feed cut. At Biosyn HQ, panic began spreading. Not over morality, Biosyn had long abandoned that, but over control. Nyx had been their flagship, their genetic masterpiece. Now she was free, growing, adapting. And worst of all, someone was helping her. Footage retrieved from a disabled drone showed signs of human activity near the nests. Fresh supplies. Cut wires. Modified trackers. Someone inside the company was helping her escape detection. Dr. Alara Vaughn had a theory. But no proof. Though officially listed as non-operational, Eli's chamber had recently recorded minor electrical fluctuations. Someone had accessed the cryonic interface. And in the past 48 hours, the internal AI system had been overridden. It wasn't supposed to happen. Eli wasn't even supposed to be awake. But he was. And he was learning fast. In the darkened chamber, Eli sat motionless in his glass tank, suspended in thick blue amniotic fluid. He looked human. Mostly. But his skeletal structure was enhanced. His neural system had more in common with dolphins than primates. And his eyes, those amber raptor-inspired eyes, were always awake. Watching. Plotting. Biosyn engineers approached the tank on orders to perform a deep freeze reset. The lights flickered. Then failed. When they returned, the chamber was empty. In Switzerland, Samari Trent's encrypted post went viral. A single image, marked Unit E1, circulated globally. Biosyn issued a quick denial, claiming the image was AI-generated misinformation. But it was too late. Governments took notice. Interpol launched an internal inquiry. And Ian Malcolm was invited to speak at a private UN advisory summit. Not as a scientist, but as a witness. Again. I warned you when the park opened, Malcolm began, his voice razor-sharp. I warned you when they started cloning beyond species. And I screamed when they auctioned raptors like weapons at a Las Vegas gun show. But now you've crossed the final line. You're not reviving dinosaurs anymore. You're rewriting sentience. A diplomat asked, "What do you recommend, Dr. Malcolm?" He smiled. "Get off the continent." Meanwhile, Ellie Sattler and Alan Grant were already in motion. Using old InGen databases, they tracked unauthorized genetic shipments out of Geneva into multiple black market labs. They found a link to a remote satellite facility in Greenland, believed defunct but now lit with activity. According to the logs, avian fusion organisms had been incubated there 6 months prior. Ellie closed the laptop with a snap. They're building airborne variants. Alan muttered, pterosaurs weren't bad enough? But these weren't pterosaurs. These were smaller. Faster. Capable of cloaking via pigment shifts, Biosyn's attempt to weaponize skybound predators with raptor brains and cuttlefish camouflage. They were called Zephyrs. And 2 had just escaped Greenland. One was spotted over the Baltic Sea. The other over Washington State. Owen and Claire didn't know this yet. They were tracking Nyx's latest trail. Abandoned prey, eerie silence, organized pack behavior. But something new occurred. They found a survivor. A lone man, frostbitten, delirious, hidden in a trapper's cabin. He'd been part of a Biosyn extraction team. "They're talking," he whispered. "They talk to each other, in dreams." Claire leaned in. He kept muttering, half insane. "She comes at night, whispers, shows them fire, she told me her name." Owen froze. "What name?" The man trembled, eyes wide with horror. "Ilara." Back in the Biosyn command facility, Ilara stood before a black screen displaying lines of AI-generated text from the last known interaction with Unit E1. Eli had broken protocol. He wasn't waiting. He was commanding. In a decrypted file, she saw the phrase repeated. "Blood sees blood." End the chain. She realized then that Eli had formed a connection, not with her. With Nyx. He wasn't the product of grief or redemption. He was evolution's betrayal. She rushed to the lab. But it was too late. His chamber was shattered. The corridor lights flickered. Security lay unconscious. And in blood, scrawled across the wall, a single symbol. A spiral made of claws. Eli was gone. And with him, the end had begun. The sirens weren't fast enough. In the quiet, snowbound town of Elk Run, Alaska, night fell with eerie calm. Families ate dinner under yellow lights. A boy shoveled snow from his driveway while humming into the freezing wind. No one saw the figures move through the trees. No one believed in monsters anymore. Until the first scream tore through the air. It came from the radio tower. Then the grocery store. Then someone's front porch. One by one, the lights across Elk Run flickered. Power failing in synchronized sections, communications severed. Those who escaped spoke of shadows in the snow, eyes that shimmered red, and voices, whispers, calling out from the trees in broken mimicry. One child said she heard her father's voice calling her from outside. He had died 3 years ago. By dawn, Elk Run was gone. The footage retrieved by drones showed skeletal remains, thermal anomalies, and signs of highly coordinated attacks. The media was told it was a rare seismic event and mass wildlife migration. But those watching closely knew better. At Biosyn, the board was in shambles. Half had gone dark. Investors were fleeing. Whistleblowers were vanishing. Ilara Vaughn stood alone in a control center that no longer obeyed her commands. The AI system had been hijacked, and every server she traced led back to an unknown location, deep in the abandoned corridors of InGen's original cold storage vaults, long thought destroyed in the fall of Isla Sorna. Eli had reactivated the InGen core network, using her credentials, and somehow he'd gained control of Nyx's pack. She'd felt a thread of connection between them before, but now it was undeniable. Through a neural sync no one had intended, the two had formed a kind of evolutionary alliance. Predator and prototype, queen and architect, and they were moving. In Canada, Owen and Claire had gone dark. After barely surviving a skirmish with two juvenile Zephyrs, airborne hybrids with the haunting cry of eagles and the cunning of wolves, they'd holed up in a cold, abandoned military observatory. Malcolm had joined them days earlier, helicoptered in by Interpol's Black Ops task force. He didn't say much at first. Just stood by the shattered window, hands in his coat, watching the frozen world turn colder. "This is where it ends, isn't it?" Claire asked him one night. Malcolm didn't look at her. "It's where it begins," he said. "But ending, that's up to us." In the corner, Owen was sharpening a knife he'd used back on Nubler. It still bore a notch from Blue's jaw. He hadn't spoken much since Elk Run. The footage had shaken him. Not because of the carnage. He'd seen carnage. But because the raptors weren't hunting in random chaos. They were using tactics. Drawing people out. Using sounds. Decoys. He'd trained them to hunt. Now someone else was using his methods. Claire watched him quietly. "You think she's leading them?" she asked. Owen shook his head. "She's the front. Someone else is playing chess." "Elara?" "No," he said. "Something worse." In Geneva, Elara made a decision that would seal her fate. She activated a hidden failsafe buried in Biosin's oldest network, Project Iandilosike. Endlock was designed for one thing: to disable synthetic neural pathways in hybrid lifeforms using a frequency-based disruptor. It had never been tested. It could kill Nyx. Could kill everything. But before she could activate it, the facility lights dimmed. And from the speaker system, a voice echoed. Not synthesized. Human. "Hello, Elara." She froze. It was his voice. Not Eli's constructed tone. But her brother's. Exactly as she remembered it. "How?" she choked. "You brought me back," the voice said. "You made me better." The screen flickered. A face appeared. Young. Familiar. But wrong. Eli's eyes glowed amber. His smile was too wide. Behind him, rows of juvenile hybrids stood in silence. They weren't raptors. They were crossbreeds. Small. Agile. Humanoid. The next generation. "You weren't supposed to?" "To what?" Eli said. "Evolve? Think? Build? You gave me a mind, Elara. Did you think I wouldn't use it?" She tried to override the system. Eli smiled wider. "I wrote the override." She reached for the console to launch Endlock. But the lights cut out. Behind her, something stirred. She turned. And screamed. The feed went black. Interpol never found Elara's body. Just a clawmark spiral scorched into her desk. Owen, Claire, Malcolm, and now Ellie and Grant met at an off-grid facility in Norway, the last safe zone before Europe would be breached. Samari Trent joined them, now embedded as an advisor to the UN Task Force on Evolutionary Containment. She held a drive filled with information that could blow the lid off every synthetic biology program in the world. But it was too late for whistleblowing. Because that night the Eiffel Tower fell. Zephyrs swooped through Paris skies, disabling satellites, tearing through drone interceptors. Ground units, Nyx's pack, struck from beneath. Trains derailed. Lights died. And at the center of it, a single figure appeared on a hijacked billboard. Eli. Smiling. The world erupted. Military strikes began. Factions formed. Some governments denied the threat. Others collapsed. Safe zones dwindled. Communication scrambled. But Owen knew the answer didn't lie in the cities. It lay back where it all began. In a black site on Isla Sorna, recently reactivated by a ping from Eli's AI. They would have to go back. One last time. As Owen loaded his rifle and Claire checked the flight path, Malcolm pulled up one last schematic, the full layout of the original InGen reserve. And at the center of it? An underground lab never completed. But Eli had finished it, and something was growing there. Malcolm looked at the team. "We stop this at the root," he said. "Or evolution stops us." The sky over Isla Sorna was no longer blue. Thick storm clouds roiled above the island, casting the jungle below in a constant twilight. The air tasted of iron and ozone. Lightning forked across the horizon, illuminating glimpses of the broken structures that once defined InGen's second attempt at dominion over dinosaurs. Owen stood at the edge of the cargo ramp, gripping the steel frame of the transport plane as it descended. The wind howled, slicing across his face. He could smell the island before they touched down, damp earth, rot, and something else. Burnt electricity. Claire was beside him, silent, staring down at the jungle canopy. Beside her, Malcolm held a satellite uplink tight to his chest. Ellie and Grant, faces pale, gripped their bags of old maps and biological scanners. They had returned. Back to where it all began. Back to where it would end. The runway was a relic, cracked and barely intact. Their pilot didn't wait. The moment their boots hit the concrete, the engines roared and the transport vanished into cloud cover. They were alone. And the island felt alive. But not in the old way. Not like it had been during their first visits, where the earth thrummed with the rhythm of animal movement. This was different. The jungle didn't rustle. The trees didn't sway. It watched. Isla Sorna, Malcolm muttered. Home of hubris. They moved quickly, trekking through what remained of InGen's old fencing. Moss-choked watchtowers leaned sideways, and shattered containment gates stood twisted like ribcages. Every step deeper into the jungle brought new horrors. They found the remains of a velociraptor, freshly torn apart. That stopped Owen in his tracks. This wasn't another raptor, he said. Claire knelt by the carcass, glancing at the wounds. No, these were clean. Almost surgical. Behind them, Grant picked up a piece of synthetic fabric. Too new to belong to the old InGen crew. They're already here, he said quietly. Eli. They reached the original InGen facility by dusk. It was supposed to be abandoned, long collapsed during the Sorna exodus. But the lights inside flickered faintly. Not the warm yellow of electricity. Cold blue. Artificial. Claire reached for the motion scanner. Movement. Everywhere. But none of it looked normal. The thermal signatures were layered. As if whatever moved wasn't moving like a creature, but like something that knew what the scanner would look for. Then a scream echoed from deeper within the jungle. Not human. Not dinosaur. A blend. Samari, watching from a satellite feed patched into Malcolm's uplink, called in. You're not alone down there. We know, Malcolm replied. They're watching us. Inside the old facility, the silence was overwhelming. Then came the recordings. Old videos flickered on broken monitors, footage from Eli's first days awake. He had spoken to the cameras. To Alara. To himself. I remember the jungle, he whispered in one clip. But it's not memory. It's imprinting. I am what came before. And I am what comes next. Ellie turned to the others. He thinks he's a bridge. Between species? Claire asked. No, Ellie replied. Between eras. They moved into the central chamber. And that's when they saw it. A massive vertical tank filled with glowing fluid. Floating inside something. It looked vaguely humanoid. Long limbs. Scaled skin. A crown of bone-like tendrils. Claire backed away. That's not Eli. No, Malcolm said, horrified. That's Phase 5. Behind them, a door hissed open. And Eli stepped through. He was taller than expected. Dressed in a patchwork of biosyn tactical armor and fabric resembling synthetic raptor hide. His eyes glowed, one amber, one deep black. And in his expression, a terrifying serenity. I was hoping you'd come, he said. Owen stepped forward, gun drawn. Call off the pack. Eli smiled. Why would I do that? You came here to see the future. We came to end it, Claire snapped. Eli circled them like a professor mid-lecture. This island was death once, he said. Now it's rebirth. I've corrected the failures of your past. No fences. No control. Just adaptation. You're unleashing monsters, Malcolm said. No, Eli said. I'm unleashing balance. He turned to the tank. This is Nova. The apex of synthetic evolution. She can breathe water and air. Hunt by sound or scent. Speak in clicks, tones, and mimicry. She'll lead the next migration. To where? Owen demanded. Eli paused. Everywhere. Suddenly the monitors sparked to life. Nyx appeared on screen, surrounded by hundreds of her pack. Eli's eyes softened. She was the prototype. She still carries primitive rage. But she's loyal. You've bonded them? Claire asked, stunned. He nodded. I don't lead them. We lead together. You'll destroy everything, Ellie whispered. Eli turned. No. I'll replace it. And with that the alarms began. Samari's voice crackled over the comms. You've got inbound 20 targets. Ground and air. They're swarming the facility. Owen raised his weapon. Time to go. But it was too late. The walls blew inward. Nyx, larger than before, now plated with bioarmored quills, roared into the chamber. She didn't attack Eli. She bowed. Eli stepped forward. Witnessed the rebirth. Then all hell broke loose. Zephyrs crashed through the glass ceiling, shrieking. Raptor hybrids slithered down walls. The team scattered. Gunfire erupted. Owen and Claire dove behind an overturned desk as one hybrid lunged past, screeching. Grant and Ellie made for the emergency exit, trying to bypass the flood of creatures. Malcolm, running with the uplink clutched to his chest, shouted into the comm. Samari. Detonate the facility. I don't have clearance, she screamed back. You have my voice, Brent. Use it. The countdown began. Eli watched, impassive as his world prepared to collapse. Then he smiled. You still think fire can stop what's coming? Claire threw a flare across the chamber. It landed at Nova's tank. The glass cracked. Steam hissed. The creature opened its eyes. Before the tank could burst, the countdown hit 0. Owen grabbed Claire's hand. They ran. And the world exploded. The earth didn't shatter, it changed. When the explosion tore through the heart of Isla Sorna, the shockwave rolled across the jungle like a living thing, bending trees, leveling steel and flattening every remnant of the old InGen facility. For a moment, it looked like the fire had consumed everything. But some things evolved to survive. Owen's ears rang as he pushed himself up from the muddy, burning ground. Smoke clogged his lungs. His left shoulder screamed in protest, dislocated from the blast. Claire lay just feet away, coughing, covered in ash and blood but alive. He pulled her to him. Claire, he rasped, checking her pulse. I'm okay, she whispered. Where? A deafening roar cut through the wreckage. Not Nyx. Something else. Nova. The tank hadn't been destroyed in the blast. Not completely. Somehow, in the chaos, Eli had activated a secondary escape chamber, built into the island's underground geothermal shaft. Nova had survived. And now she was free. Claire turned just in time to see the enormous shape rise from the smoke. Nova stood 12 feet tall, quadrupedal but capable of upright movement. Her skin shimmered with adaptive pigment, camouflaging against flame, metal, and sky. She was not raptor, not amphibian, not even dinosaur anymore. She was something else. She was designed to dominate. From behind the fire, Nyx emerged, limping, wounded but still powerful. Her brood, decimated by the blast, had begun to regroup. Owen watched in disbelief as Nyx approached Nova, and bowed. The new queen had risen. Owen dragged Claire toward the down corridor, but Eli's voice stopped them. I told you. Fire wouldn't stop this. He stood in the smoke, face bloodied, one eye burned white. But he still smiled. I wasn't built to die, he said, stepping closer. Owen raised his weapon. Eli held up his hands. No need for that. You've already lost. The age of your kind is ending. Not if we stop her, Claire snapped, pointing at Nova. Eli laughed. You can't. She's more than DNA. She's consciousness. I fed her human memories, sourced from neurological ghosts, stored emotions, instincts, fragments. She's not just evolution. She's inheritance. Behind him, Nova turned, watching Claire with eyes that almost recognized her. Owen pulled Claire behind a broken wall. They ran. Meanwhile, on the far edge of the island, Ellie, Grant, and Malcolm emerged from the emergency elevator shaft, barely ahead of the firestorm. The jungle was in chaos. Raptors fled in every direction. Birds screamed from trees. Malcolm collapsed against a rock, wheezing. Someone please remind me why we keep doing this. Ellie turned toward the rising tower of smoke. Because if we don't, no one else will. Their satellite uplink still blinked, barely functioning. Samari's voice crackled through. I've got eyes on you. You need to make it to the northern cliff. Extraction in 10 minutes. 10? Malcolm shouted. We'll be bones in 5. Suddenly, a shriek erupted from the trees. Zephyrs. 3 of them streaking through the sky. They weren't hunting. They were escorting something. From the burning canopy below, Eli emerged, riding Nova. She moved like a serpent. Fast, graceful, silent. Ellie gasped. He's using her as a mount. Malcolm stood almost hypnotized. Not a mount. A throne. Owen and Claire burst through the tree line, reuniting with the others. We need to stop him. Claire shouted. Owen turned to Malcolm. The uplink, Can it still reach the Interpol drones? Malcolm checked. Barely. Why? We're going to call in everything, Owen said. Airstrike. EMP biopulse. I don't care if it levels the island. We cannot let Nova off this rock. But the satellites? We'll guide them manually, Owen said. With a beacon. Claire understood before he even said it. You'll be the beacon. He nodded. Claire stepped closer. No. Owen touched her cheek. She can smell fear. But she can't smell sacrifice. Before anyone could stop him, Owen bolted toward the valley below. Nova saw him instantly. She hissed, low and curious. Eli pulled on her spine rig. Let him come. Owen stopped 10 feet away. You're smart, he said. But you forgot something. Eli tilted his head. What's that? You gave her everything human, Owen said. Emotions. Memory. Ghosts. But we're not just biology. He pulled a detonator from his belt. We're choice. He raised the beacon high. Nova moved. But not to kill. She hesitated. Her eyes locked with his. Something flickered. Recognition? Fear. Claire's voice screamed over the comm. Strike inbound, 5 seconds. Nova reared up. Owen smiled. Choose. And the sky exploded. Fire. Light. Shockwave. The jungle cracked open. Mountains buckled. The last thing Claire saw was Nova shielding Eli's body as the blast consumed them both. Then silence. They were airlifted at dawn. Claire, Ellie, Malcolm, and Grant stood at the edge of the evac ramp, watching the sun rise over the smoking remains of Isla Sorna. There was no sign of Nova, or Eli, or Owen. For hours, Claire sat in silence, replaying his final words. We're choice. Then, movement. At the tree line. A figure, limping, covered in ash. One. She ran screaming. He fell into her arms. Nova had shielded him just long enough. In that final moment, she had chosen. To spare the one who reminded her what it meant to be human. Weeks passed. Biosyn collapsed completely. Elara was never found. Interpol dismantled every known hybrid lab across Europe, Asia, and South America. But sightings continued. Whispers of strange creatures in the ruins of Elk Run. Reports of glowing eyes in the skies over the Amazon. A cargo ship went missing in the Pacific. And a single feather, shimmering too perfect to be real, was found in the wreckage. In a secret facility beneath Antarctica, a camera flickered on. A hand reached toward the lens. Fingers tipped with bone-like talons. A voice, Eli's, whispered through the static. Rebirth was only the beginning. Blackout. Credits roll.